Okay, so today's daf yomi is Ayin Zion of Bava Metzia, 77 of Bava Metzia. Today's daf yomi is dedicated for a Yeshua for Am Yisrael, a Shmira for the Chayalim, a Hatzalah for the Shuliyim. So today's daf yomi tells us the following: Amar Rava, hi man. So if there was a person, hold on 1 second. Hi, says Rava, hi man. So Ogir Agure Wadavla. So there was a person who hired workers to irrigate his field on 77A, 3 lines from the top. The Asa Mitra, and then the rain came, and so he didn't need the workers to irrigate the field anymore because it had rained. So Pseda the poem means say even though the workers showed up to do the job, it's their loss. They don't get to do the work because Rashi says he could say it's your bad luck. Mazalaichu garam. They had came and they had viewed the field previously, so they knew that it could rain. They knew that there was this risk, and they might not get there. They might not get the opportunity to do the job, and so therefore it's their loss. But let's say Asa Nahara, let's say a river came and irrigated the field. Say the Balabayas. But if a river came and irrigated the field, well, then we're going to say it's the landowner's loss. And we'll see in a moment why exactly the river is, meaning to say, Rashi explains that the reason why it's the landowner's loss, and we'll see this from the Gemara, is because the workers didn't know that there was a river in that vicinity that would sometimes come and irrigate the field. And so therefore we're going to say it's the landowner's fault, but not the workers, because they weren't expected to know. But yet he still has to pay them of the amount that's called pol batal. What's pol batal? That is the amount that a person will be paid to not work that day. Meaning to say, how much would they expect to take to not work? And so that's obviously less than if they were working a full day's wage, but it's not nothing. But Amarava, Haiman to Oger Agure Ludava, Upasik Nara Bapalgadiyoma. Let's say a person hires workers to irrigate his field, and the river stops in the middle of the day, meaning to say there was a river feeding the field, and it stopped in the middle of the day. So what do we do under those circumstances? The workers can't work anymore. Ego avid deposik, if it's unusual that it stops, that's pseida de bowling. Well, then it's the workers' bad luck, and then they're only getting paid for the amount of work they've done. But if it is avid deposak, if the river typically does stop, ibnei masa, if these are people who live in the town and therefore they're expected to be aware of this, pseida de poem. That's the loss of the workers. But lavnei masa, but if they're not from that town, so they have no way of knowing, that's pseida de balabayas. Well, then that's going to be the landowner's loss, and he has to compensate them for the full day. Like we said above, under those circumstances, he would have to give them kipol bato, like a worker doesn't. Like, how much would you pay the worker not to work? Amar Rava, Haiman to agar agure lavidita. So says Rava, somebody who hires workers to work for him. The sham avidase bepalga dioma. Then he completes his job. You hire him for a day, and he completes the job you gave him midway through the day. Now yisle avidita to nicha yavlahu. Hey, let's say you have work that's not as strenuous, then you could give him that work to do because you hired him for the whole day. Or if it's a similar level of work, then you could give him this work. But the kashamina, but if it's harder, you can't give him harder work. No single and you have to pay them a full day's wages. So Gemara says, but why do you have to pay them a full day's wages if you have nothing to give him? Amai, we said in this case, give him the amount of work that a person would be paid to not work that day. So that's all you should have to give him in a case where he finishes his job halfway through. No, the Gemara says, no, Rava was talking about these people who are called the Achushe de Mechuza. that these were people that they always had to be working. They never stopped working. Tilo Avdi Chalshi, that these were people who felt, listen, if we don't work, we're going to get weaker. We always need to be working. And so therefore, they're really at a loss if they don't work. And therefore, those people, you have to give them the full wages. Amar Mar, Shaman Lahem is Masha Asu. So we had said in the Bryce on the previous page that if there is a worker who in the middle he stopped working and he quit the job in the middle, then we have to figure out how much we have to pay him. So let's say he had contracted for 2 selah, and the selah is 4 dinarim. But now the price of labor went up by 50%. So now, even though he has half left, it's no longer the part that's remaining is not 4 dinarim, but it's 6 dinarim. So how much do we pay the initial worker? So he says shaman lahem et masha asu. So we evaluate what they did. Ketzad hayayafa shisha dinarim nosin lahem selah. So the Rabbanan's position is even if what's remaining is 6 dinar, meaning even say if the price of labor went up by 50%, still nevertheless we give them their 50%, their selah. Because Kasavri Rabbanan Yad Poal Yona, because the Rabbanan and Rabbi Dosa argues with the Rabbanan, and our Mishnah argues with this Rabbanan. Rabbanan of the position that the worker has the upper hand, and so therefore, for this reason, the worker is going to get his 50%, and he's not responsible to make the owner whole for the fact that the labor went up. Or says the Brisa, or else the workers should complete their work, and then they'll take the full price that they were promised, which was 2 selah. Gemara says, well, it's obvious. If they do their job, they're entitled to what they contracted for. Pshita, that's obvious. Gemara says, no, Tzricha, we're talking about a case, Diyaker Avidasa. I'm talking about a case where the price of labor went up. The Imru Poalim. And then the workers said, well, we're out of here. We're not staying for this. But also Barabayas Ufaisinu, and the landowner came and placated them to return. Ma'odatemi might have said, Matsu Amrule, that the workers could say to him, Kimefaisinan Adata Tetafaslan Agra. We came back because we assumed that you were going to give us more money. That's why that you're going to now start paying us at the more expensive labor. Kamash Malon, no, he says to them, I didn't intend to give you more money. I just intended to give you more perks, more swag, more food and drink. And then if they did, the Brisa said, Selah no same lam selah. If they contracted to do the job for selah, you give them a selah. Well, the Gemara says, well, isn't that obvious? Pshita, that if they said that they're going to do work for a selah, then you give them a selah. Isn't that obvious? Gemara says, no, we're talking about a case, Tizal Avidasa Meikara, that the price of labor went down. Va'agrinu b'tafei zuze. And he had hired them by promising them he's going to give them one extra zuz, uasof, but in the end, Iyaker Avidasa. But in the end, the price of labor went up, and everybody else was getting one extra zuz also, meaning he had said initially he's going to give them 4, and everybody else was getting 3. But now the price of labor went up, and everybody else was getting 4. Ma'alatema, he might have said, Amrele, Tafe Zuze, Amrislan. Tafe Zuze Havon. You might have said that they claimed to him, look, you always promised us you're going to give us one extra zuz. Well, now the price of labor went up. You should give us one extra zuz on top of that. Kamash Malon, no. To Amr Lahu, he says to them, Ki Amr Lahu Tafi Zuze, when I said I'm going to give you an extra zuz, Dulo Ave Kim Lahu. That's where I only said I was going to give you an extra zuz when I saw that you weren't willing to accept anything less than 4. But Hashta Kimlach, but now I see that you accepted the 4, so I don't have to give you more money. So 2 ways to look at that. Rabbi Dosa, however, argues with the rabbis, and Rabbi Dosa says that the workers who quit in the middle have the lower hand. Rabbi Dosa Omar Shaman Lames Masha Asid Liyasos. We look at what the price of labor has gone up to, and therefore we make the owner whole. And so if their price of labor is 50% more, then and they quit in the middle, then they get 50% less, so that the owner could be made whole. Shisha dinarim nosalem shekel. He would basically, if it went up to 60 dinarim, he would cut them in half and they would get a shekel. Because Rabbi Dos is a position, because Savar Yad Po al Tachtoni, he says the worker has the lower hand. Gemara says, "Oh, yigmaru malachton v'yitlu shnei salaim," or else they can complete their job and get the two selah. Well, obviously, if they complete their job, they get what they're contracted for. No, Gemara says, "Pshita, isn't that obvious?" No, utzricha dezal avidasa. We're talking about where the price of labor went down. The Amar Balabayas, in this case, the landowner is the one who said, "I'm out of here. I don't want to do this job." The also po'alim ufaisu, that the workers went and said to the owner, "No, no, we want to still work for you." Mao the Tema, you might have said Matzi Amarwahu that he could say to them, Hadata de Batsri Sulimi Agrai. He said, "Oh, you came back. I thought I can now pay you the lower price." Kamash Milan, no, the Amri way they said to him, Adati David non Lacha Avidas Shapirtan. We came back. We said we're going to work extra hard. We're going to add more bleach to the cleaning utensils. No, we were going to work harder. Not that you're going to pay us. That he could say, not that you're going to be able to pay us less. If they contracted for a sell, no sinlam sell, and he gives them a sell. Pshita, wasn't that obvious? So it's the same thing. Amarfuna Breder of Nasan Lutzricha. Zilo inu gabe zuzime kar. They had initially said, "We'll work for you for one zuz less." But what happened was it was so vzala vidasa, but in the end, the price of labor went down for everybody. Maldatema, you might have thought, Batzer Zizu Amrisui. He might have thought that the owner could claim, "You promised to work for me for one zuz less." Batzer Zuza Yavinuchu. So I'm going to give you one zuz less than the going market rate now. Kamash Muan, no, the Amri that they say to him, Kiamarnocha. But your zuze the lave kimloch, hasha kimloch. We had said we'll work for one zuz less because we didn't think you'd work for that higher price. You'd hire us for the higher price, but we saw you now hire us for that price. That's what we want. Amar Rav halacha Rabbi Dosa. So Rav says the law is like Rabbi Dosa. Again, Rabbi Dosa said that the worker has the lower hand, and so therefore, if he quits in the middle, he has to make sure that the owner is made whole for the job, and if he has to pay other laborers more, it comes out of the worker's salary. But does Rav really say that the law is like Rabbi Dosa when he says the worker has the lower hand? Mi amarav, achiva amarav, po yachol achzer bo afilu b'chatzi hayom. But Rav says that a worker can leave even in the middle of the day, and that the worker would have the upper hand. Now, what's the basis for this? So Rashi says that the basis for this is that we're not slaves. Hashem says we're slaves to God, not to other people. So a worker is allowed to leave. So therefore, he says the worker is allowed to leave even in the middle of the day. That's what Rav said. So how can Rav say that the law is like Rabbi Dosa says the worker has the lower hand? So the Gemara says, okay, let's maybe make a distinction between the type of work. A sachir is a day laborer. So, and then there's a kablan who's a contractor. So that with respect to a day laborer, we'll say that they're not slaves and they could quit. But a kablan, he's working for himself, so maybe he can't quit. And so therefore, if he quits, that we're going to say that he would have the lower hand, but the slayer would have the upper hand. Maybe that's the distinction that Rabbi Dosa is making. Well, me Shanilay, the Gemara says no. He doesn't make such a distinction about Tanya because we have a brisa that said Hasochar Sapol. You hire a worker, and in the middle of the day, the worker hears he hears somebody died, or he got a fever. If he is a day laborer, no single scharo. We're on top of 77b. You give him his wages. Im kabonu, no single kabu. So you pay him his. If he was a contractor, you give him for what he worked also. Now, so obviously in that case, you're going to give him the worker has the upper hand, and there was a case where somebody got sick in his family, or there was extenuating circumstances, so it's not his fault. Now, who is this brisa? Who's the author? Money. Who's the author? If you want to say the author of this brisa is Rabbanon, Ma'ir Yashama. Why do we have to do such a case of extenuating circumstances? Ma'ir Yashama Shameislo Mei, so Shachazusu Kama, the honest. Why do we have to say that it's a case where he heard that somebody died or that he got sick? Kilo honest Nami, the Rabbanon say that he always has the upper hand, even if it was not extenuating circumstances. So I'm a Rabbanon Yapol Al Yona. The Rabbanon always say that the worker has the upper hand. Must be Elav Rabbi Dosa. It must be this price is saying that it's Rabbi Dosa. We see from here, the Rabbi Dosa himself draws no distinction between a day laborer and a contractor, because in this brisa there's no distinction. And he says that the worker always has the lower hand unless it's extenuating circumstances. So the Gemara answers no. I'm Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak. This price is the reason why this price has to specify that he has that in this case he has the upper hand, the worker, in both cases. It's because it's talking about a davar avod, is because it's a matter where the thing is that if the worker quits in the middle, all these cases where we said that the worker has the upper hand, according to the Rabbanan, according to and where it's extenuating circumstances, that's where it's something that it's going to be, if he doesn't finish a job, it's going to be a tremendous loss for the owner. So there, we don't give the worker that right. But divrei hakol means say if it's a tremendous loss for the owner, according to Rabbi Dosa, and he has even though it's a tremendous loss, if he has an excuse, you still have to give him the upper hand. Tanan. So the Gemara now says, let's raise our Mishnah. Let's bring our Mishnah into the discussion. Kol Mishana Yadu al Tachtona, which is the case of a Mishana. Is you give a worker a job as a contractor, and he changes it. Then he has the lower hand. The worker has the lower hand. Kol Chozerbo Yadu al Tachtona, and whatever worker changes, if the workers leave, they have the lower hand. So Bishlam Kol Mishana Yadu al Tachtona. It makes sense if you say if the contractor changes in the middle that he has the lower hand, the stam on Tanakh Rabbi Yehuda. So we're going to say that the stam on Tanakh Rabbi Yehuda. Our Mishnah is passing like Rabbi Yehuda, who says that in the case where you change it, the contractor changes the terms, he has to make good to the purchaser. It's his fault. It's the contractor's fault. That makes sense. When it says the second case, whoever changes in the middle, he has the lower hand. Isn't that coming to say, talk about a day laborer? What's it including? Isn't it saying that Rabbi Dosa rules this way not only by a contractor, but even by a day laborer? And we see that Rabbi Dosa does not distinguish between a day laborer and a contractor. He always says the worker has the lower hand. And so therefore, Rav, who says that, why does Rav say the law is not like Rabbi Dosa? Gemara says, meaning to say, when Rav says in one case, law is like Rabbi Dosa, and when he says in the other, it seems that Rabbi Dosa himself is not distinguishing between a day laborer and a contractor. The Gemara says, okay, you're right. Rabbi Dosa, Tarati Kama. Rabbi Dosa said it in both cases, both by a contractor and even by a day laborer, the worker does not have the upper hand. The Rav Savalai Kavasa, but Rav only agrees with him by a contractor that the worker does not have the upper hand. But the but by day labor, he would say, Rav would argue with Rabbi Dosa and follow the Rabbanan and say that the worker has the upper hand. Or alternatively, when it says in the Mishnah, whoever reverses he has the lower hand, look at the Tanya. What's it referring to? It's referring to a different context. It refers to koach hozerbo. What does that mean? Ketzad. It refers to the following case. Let's say a person sells his friend a field for $1,000, 1,000 zuz, and a friend gives you 200 zuz. So basically, you sold your field for $1,000. The person only gave you 200 for it. Now, let's say the seller is the one who wants to back out. Then the purchaser has the upper hand. And if the purchaser is if the seller is one who's going back, then the purchaser has the upper hand, and he could say either give me back my money or give me land, or give me the equivalent in land that I paid. And where does the purchaser get to take it from? From the best property of the seller. But if the purchaser is the one who changes it, the seller has the upper hand. If he wanted, he could say, take back your money. Or he could say, I'm going to force you to take property according to the value of what you paid. And where does he force him to take it from? From the lease of the property. So when the Mishnah is saying that the whoever reverses has the lower hand, that's the context in which it's referring to. And Rashbag says, Rashbag says we have to teach the contract lawyers, the real estate lawyers, to teach them how they can make it so that the people cannot reverse. Kesad, that you put it in writing. Kosiv, well, you write, Ani poni ben poni, macharti sada ponis, ponis be'elav zuz. You write, I said, I sold my field for 1,000 zuz, v'nas only mehem matayim zuz, and they paid 200 for it. Already no shebo chas zuz, and the rest is transferred into a loan. And in those cases, in that case, if you put that in writing and he's acquired the land and the rest is a loan and he can't back out of any aspect of it. So that's how the real estate lawyers have to word their contract, according to Rashbag. So the Gemara says, first, let's analyze this brisa, which we just mentioned. That if the purchaser is the one who's reversed himself, if the seller is the one who reversed himself, that the purchaser can take the equivalent from the land, which land? Mina'idis, from the best property. Gemara says, wait, we assume it's from the best of all of his properties, of all the seller's properties. But why? The purchaser really is just like a creditor there. And we have a general principle of the Tanan. We have a general statement in the Mishnah Gittin. Balchov dino bebenim. Generally speaking, a creditor can only see from the average properties of the person he's making a claim from the debtor. So in this case, why can he get it from the best of his properties? And secondly, we have this land that he paid money for. Why can't he just go and take it from all the other money? So Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, so when it says from the best and the worst, it means from that property that he sold. He could take it from the best or the worst. Ravacha gives a different explanation, and some people can be very sympathetic to this. He says, even from the best of all of his assets. Why? If a person's basically has to sell his property or purchase his property, a person who's typically buying property for 1,000 zuz, all of his other properties he has to sell in order to raise the money. And so therefore, Havile Kenizak, so he's like he damaged him. And so Vatanan Nizak and Shemalan Ba'idis, the people who are damaged, they could collect from the best of the property. This guy was wrong. The guy who was purchasing it was wrong. He had to liquidate his assets in order to get the money. So it was like he was damaged. Rashbag says, we teach them how they can't we make the contract so that they can't reverse it. So it's a final sale. How? Taima, so the Gemara explains the reason is the cost of Hachi that he wrote this. So low cost of Hachi, low Kani. But if he wouldn't have written this, it would not have been acquired. Tanya, really, is that really the case? We have a price that says, if a person gives a guarantee to his friend, and he says to him, if I go back, Arvoni Machucha, my guarantee for the property is I'm giving it to you. And the seller says, if I'm the one who reverses, I'll double your guarantee. Under those circumstances, the stipulations are upheld, the conditions are upheld. That's the position of Divrei Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi l'tamei, and Rabbi Yossi follows his logic, who says asmachta kanya. He says that even though it's an exaggerated statement, it still works. Whereas Rabbi Huda says dayo sheyikna keneged ervono. He says no, all they acquire is what they put down the collateral, but they don't get the extra stuff that they said. And Amar B'Shimon Gamliel B'Medvar Mamurim. When do we say this? Bisman Sh'Amarlo Arvoni. Hold on one second. Reb Shimon Gamliel says, when do we say this? When he says Arvoni Yikon. He says when he says my guarantee will be the acquisition. Aval Machar also the Baal of Zuz, but let's say he sold them the field for 1,000. And he gave it to them for 500. Then he acquires it and he returns him the rest even after many years. It's a loan. And so we see, according to Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, in this source, you don't have to actually write it. So the Gemara says, Lo kasha, no, it depends. We see if the person who was purchasing it was still trying to collect the money. Meaning, say, if the person who was selling it was still trying to collect the money, because if he's still trying to collect the money, it goes to a state of mind that he doesn't think he has the money yet. He's still trying to go and collect money from somebody else. He's still trying to collect everything. Indeed, somebody who lends 1,000 zuz, and the borrower pays him back a little by little. So under those circumstances, it's considered a payment or the Islay Tarumas Gabe, the Amalei Afsedino Minai, because he's saying to him, you cost me money. Wait, did I skip a line? Basically, that's the idea that it goes to a state of mind. If he's still looking to collect, it means he doesn't consider that he has sold it yet. And now Rava says, this case actually we'll pick it up. We'll pick up this case, God willing, tonight at 7:20. We'll pick up this case. I can't do the 8 a.m. session today. Everybody, shkoyach to everybody. Everybody have a great day. If you have any questions,